Greetings, English language teachers all over the world. We're here again with Featured Teachers, a monthly webinar series brought to you by the American TESOL Institute. My name is Jason Levine, better known as Fluency MC, and I have the honor and privilege of being here once a month to introduce to you somebody in English language teaching who's done great things for learners, great things for teachers, who is inspired and inspiring. So we're going to get right into it with Annamarie Fowler. We have a topic that I have a feeling is going to be of interest to more than a few of you out there in ELT land. How can we help shy students feel confident in the classroom, or maybe introverted students, and focusing, of course, on the English language teaching classroom. But we're also going to meet Annamarie, find out who she is, what she does. But this is a topic that we'll be focusing on in our conversation. Okay, hello, Annamarie. Welcome to Featured Teachers. Hello, hello. How are you?
Thank you. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah, maybe we could just start off with you introducing yourself, telling everybody who you are, where you are, what you do.
Yeah. So I'm Annamarie Fowler. I'm the founder of Speak Confident English. I launched Speak Confident English in 2014. So I've had my own sort of online English language teaching company since then. But before that, I've been an English language teacher since 1996. I hesitate giving away
Wow, cool.
my age, but it's been a while. So since 1996, I've taught in several countries around the world and in several locations around the United States. My entire career has been working with adults, typically in business professional settings. I often was an in-house teacher inside companies like Daimler Chrysler or the Czech National Bank and things like that. So that's where I started. And today I do everything online, running my own company. I have a team that works with me, and we have a series of online courses that we offer. We also have an online community that we launched recently. So we've got lots of exciting things happening.
Very good. Very good. And you're based where right now?
At this time, I'm in Washington, D.C. Since I've met you originally, I think I've moved 2 or 3 times. So we move quite a bit. Yeah. But right now we're in DC, which is wonderful.
So I would imagine that COVID-19, the pandemic, all of that just kind of made it even more your focus to teach.
You know what?
Or didn't make a difference because you were an online person to begin with.
Right. I think, like all of us, we had no idea what to expect. And I remember that first month when things started shutting down, my team and I we have a weekly team meeting, and they showed up at the meeting just deer in headlights, worried that this might impact us. And it actually didn't impact us at all. If anything, it made people more comfortable with online courses and online classes and feeling comfortable on Zoom. So I think it helped overcome a lot of barriers that we couldn't have broken ourselves. So it's been a good couple of years for us.
That's great. And I noticed the us is grown. So you have more people working with you now. What for teachers out there watching who might want to start their own businesses or have, who did you hire first? Like, who did you find you needed to?
That's a great question. My first hire was someone, I would say, sort of a virtual assistant role. She helped me managing and creating social media content, managing our website and blog, helping with email, responding to emails and customer support. So we started there. Her role, she is still with me. I hired her. It's been 5 years, and she's been with me since then. From there, when some of our courses started to grow, I started to bring on other teachers and things like that. And so now we have a 4th teacher coming on. We have a community manager, and we have, I still have my first hire I feel like she does a little bit of everything. She knows the business as well as I do, if not better sometimes. So.
Wow. Great.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if you could give us a bit of background on your, you explained sort of the types of places you teach, the types of people you've taught, but what about like your approach and Has it
Yeah.
evolved, or is over the years, or has it remained pretty consistent?
Right. No, when I launched Speak Confident English, I definitely had an intention in mind, and I set a mission at that point to really focus on empowering women in education, empowering women to get ahead, and not at the exclusion of men. In fact, with the exception of the community we recently launched, all of our courses are available to men and women. But I just, in my experiences living and teaching abroad, I found that women were often intimidated, overshadowed,
Mm,
or just in a situation in which it wasn't culturally or socially normal to be in a classroom with men. And so I also found time and time again, women were being held back in their careers simply due to the fact that their English skills weren't up to par with
mm,
whatever the expectation might be, or they were turning down opportunities because they didn't feel confident enough in their English
mm,
skills.
mm.
And most of the time, they actually had the skills they needed. They just didn't know they had them, and they had the lack of confidence and maybe practice of actually using the language to gain that fluency that everybody's looking for.
Mm, mm,
So that was when I started Speak Common English. I just thought about all the people I had taught previously, and the ones that I enjoyed the most, the ones I connected with the most, and the ones I felt I could help the most. And that sort of became my focus for Speak Confident English. So we really cater to women, specifically women who are naturally introverted or would describe themselves as shy.
mhm.
I would say over time, what has evolved in that is that I've also expanded that to say women or individuals who come from cultures in which we might perceive them in the classroom as being shy. They
Mm,
might not actually be shy at all, but what a Western culture, an American culture, would look at someone's behavior and say, oh, that person must be really shy, when
mm.
in fact, they're just being quite respectful
Yeah.
in their cultural point of view. And so I sort of started to learn some of those behaviors and being really observant of that and doing everything I can to create environments and methods that would assist in helping those individuals really start to feel comfortable in the classroom and get outside of their comfort zone in a way that allows them to gain that confidence they're looking for.
So
So
interesting.
I'd say that's our big focus.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I have so many things I want to ask you. I just don't want to forget them, but I'll remember them. I guess the first is what you're saying about maybe it's a cultural difference. Are most of those people that you maybe in that category need to be more, outgoing, assertive, communicative because they're going to be in a different culture, or are you just trying to help them like just be more proficient in English and that's going to involve being more communicative? Or does it
Yeah.
depend? Is it about trying to
Well,
adapt to different cultures for them, or is it just using that they won't be able to learn another languages easily if they don't try to get out there with it more?
yeah. I think it's a little bit of both. And it's interesting. My team and I talk about this a lot. How much do we adjust what we do to someone else's culture versus teaching
Mm,
them how English speaking culture generally, which is really broad, but generally how how it's approached in an English speaking
mm,
culture.
mm,
We tend to be more assertive.
mm.
People who are assertive tend to get promoted or they're heard more often
Right.
because they're putting themselves out there. So it's a little bit of a balancing act between the two. And I have found that once someone gains that little extra confidence they need
Hmm.
in their own skills, they're more likely to be willing to adapt culturally in
Right.
that language. And I talk a lot about almost creating a second identity for yourself in that language. You have who you are in your language and your
Yes.
culture, but as you start to embrace another language, another culture, you might start to become a slightly new version or different version of yourself
Mm.
in that language. I find when I lived in France and in French, I'm much more direct about certain things, particularly things that I don't like,
Hmm.
than I am in English. And so that you just start to make those adjustments. But I find that we start with just gaining confidence and proficiency in the skills. And then
Hmm.
once they're there, we can
Yeah.
start to say, all right, now let's work on being a little bit more assertive and being willing to put yourself out there in a way that might feel very different to you But it is, if you're working in an American company with American colleagues, this is what is expected. So it's important to learn that skill as well. But we have to do a few things before we get there.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you just said about the skills first, being more confident in the skills. In a second, I just want to ask you, like, so what you're saying about having another identity in another language, I think it's a huge thing that I've thought of and used training teachers and with students for years. I found there's a little bit of a change happening with students who are not necessarily learning English to, learn, work in the United States or in Australia or Canada or whatever. They're going to be in meetings, especially like online, with people from all over the world, where there may not be native speakers there.
Right.
So then that really changes things.
It does.
Sure.
It absolutely.
So my question is, there's so many questions about this, but I guess the most basic question is, are the majority of your students who want to learn English for career reasons and work reasons looking to, also learn about, the culture that they're going to be working with, an English speaking culture, like the example you gave about, like, if you're going to be working in an American company, maybe be more assertive, just one example. Do you find that there are more people who are really just needing English as a world language, as opposed to kind of a language for a certain country or culture?
Yeah, we have about 50-50. I mean, I can split it almost down the middle. And so in all of our classes, we really talk about both. And we are really explicit in the fact that not everyone needs to learn how to be assertive, and not everyone needs to learn certain more cultural elements of the language. But what is important is knowing how to communicate clearly and be explicit. So if you are in an environment where there are no native speakers, you're using English as a shared language, it's really important to, you're going to have so many different cultural perspectives and levels of ability in let's say you have an online meeting with 27 people. You don't know what everybody's level of comprehension and ability might be. And so we really emphasize being clear in our articulation, thinking about how do you rephrase something. If it's clear that a message hasn't been passed, how might you rephrase it? So working on those skills of how do you use a different grammar structure, or how might you choose different vocabulary, or how might you articulate your idea in a new way? So there's a whole other world of communication skills that are required in that way.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So we try to address all of that, which is exciting. It's a lot, but it's exciting.
Yeah, well, I'm sure as you go, you're able to kind of, add on and update materials and approaches by meeting more and more students. So, great. But back to the skills idea. So, like, because I think that's the main thing about confidence that I work on, is just that if a student, is more accurate with their grammar, is more accurate with their pronunciation, is able to understand more when they read and listen, they're going to feel more confident, and it's that confidence that leads to using it and feeling and achieving fluency. So what I think probably everybody would agree with that, but maybe not agree on how to get there. So what do you think has been? I mean, what has been most effective in, like, getting students to be more proficient in the language side of things?
Yeah, I think there are several things that I have found to be helpful. A lot of it is to some degree classroom management and creating space for those students who may be shy or are introverted and need just a little bit more time to process before they articulate whatever it is that they want to say, or again, culturally need very explicit space to jump into a conversation. So a few things that we do in the online classroom is we always let students know up front, if they're joining a class for the first time with us, that they will find when we teach, there are many times we will pose a question and we will allow a very long and for some awkward silence to exist. So we've really learned, I think, again, as I'm an American, so I've learned that we don't like silence, and we fill silence. We keep talking and talking. But I have a lot of space in the classroom. We do a lot of silent moments. Or even if I state something that might be complicated, and I want students to just have a moment to think through it, I'll just stop talking. And I'm okay with that. I'll have really long, awkward silences that I'm now really comfortable with. And so we tell students up front, these silences will happen, and what we want you to do is, or what we're doing is either giving you a moment to think through what we've just said, or letting you know that there's space here for you to ask a question if you have a question. We have found that some of our students from different countries really require a pretty lengthy period of silence for them to know, okay, this is a moment where I could step in to say something or ask a question. So that's one thing that we do. We also share with students different ways in which they can let us know that they have a question or they're volunteering to answer. So I have a lot of students who aren't comfortable with saying, I have the answer, or just jumping in and saying things. So I'll say, okay, if I ask a question, you have an answer for me, you can certainly raise your hand, or you could give me kind of I'll show like a little, you could just give me a little signal, just let me a little tiny wave that's really discreet, or just look at me directly in the camera. And to me, that's a sign of eye contact. And if you're holding steady eye contact with me, I'm going to interpret that as you have an answer for me, or you have a comment. And so again, when I step back and I allow that silence to happen, what I'm doing in that moment is looking at every single person in the classroom. Is anyone giving me a discrete signal? Is anyone looking? I might see a few people doing this, but I'm also looking for the people that are clearly looking at me in the eye as their indication to say, Anne-Marie has something to say, but I'm not this person. So we do things like that. I also will warn students in advance. So particularly catering to introverts who need time to prepare, I will let students know in advance that I'll call on them. So if I ask a question and I see you, Jason, sort of do this, I'll say, okay, Jason, great. I want to hear from you. After you share your answer, I also want to hear from Henna, Liam, and Nellie. So I'll be checking on you next. And so then I'll go to you. And these people over here now have a warning, and that they have been given time to think through what their response might be, as opposed to me calling on them directly in the moment and them feeling that sense of panic. Right. So we do a lot of that. And so it's just kind of how you manage the classroom giving space. We also do a lot of pair work and small group work because a lot of our students tend to feel more comfortable in that environment. I know from my past as a teacher, and also having trained teachers and observing teachers, I made a lot of mistakes in the past. I mean, there are times when I was in a traditional classroom and I would say, okay, it's time for pair work or group work. And I give them the task and I kind of just step back and I might review my notes or draw on the chalkboard a little bit while I'm waiting. And I have found that was a real lost opportunity to go be with each group, to have that sort of a more intimate face-to-face teacher time. So for those students who are shy or more introverted, but are looking for that feedback or face-to-face time with the teacher, or a question that they want to ask, they might feel much more comfortable doing it when they're in that pair or small group. So we, even online with Zoom, with breakout rooms, we do a lot of small group work so that we are able to reduce the anxiety or tension of a large group. And then we visit and spend time with each group so that we're there, again, for corrections, to answer questions, whatever it might be, really giving that intimate time to those students. So those are a few things we found that have been really helpful. I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to stop there.
No. I think those.
And I have one more thing that I think is critical.
No. Go ahead. No. If it follows, because I think what you're talking about, I know what you're talking about. There are things there that are going to be useful for anyone teaching groups online, because you're focusing on a sort of specific personality in a lot of your students. That's fine, but I mean, generally speaking, and this is something else I want to talk about. I mean, the average person learning another language doesn't feel confident, feels shy, and everything else. So back to how do you know, is it really somebody who is shy, introverted generally, or is it because they just don't have enough of the language yet, and they or because they just don't feel comfortable yet? But in either case, what you're talking about is there's a lot of really good techniques there for in an online classroom, how to notice when students may need a little help, encouragement, to know when the right time is to say something, or so. I think it's really good. So if there's another tip in there,
yeah, I'll share one more thing, but before I do, I want to comment on something you said, that you're exactly right. Sometimes when students are not fully engaged or don't seem to be fully engaged or aren't volunteering themselves in the classroom, we don't know if it's because they're shy, lack of comprehension, lack of ability and skill. Maybe they just need a little bit more time. And that's where, going back to the mistake I made as an early teacher, for students who are shy or introverted or are lacking the skills, that becomes far more apparent when they're in that small group or pair work atmosphere. And so when I did my own thing during that activity, I didn't get to observe that or see that or become aware of what it is that student what challenges he or she might be facing. So now when we're in our small groups, it's immediately apparent, okay, this student didn't quite catch the activity, or this student clearly isn't comprehending this grammar structure that we're working on, or whatever the case might be, or this student actually totally gets it and is suddenly way more engaged in the classroom or in this conversation because we've removed that large group environment. So we start to see that more clearly in those activities, and then we can address that more appropriately from there. But another thing I found, and it's by no means a secret, but I think for shy speakers, it tends to work really well, is recording yourself and then going back and listening to it. It is the most uncomfortable thing I think most people can do at the beginning, especially in another language, because we never like the way we sound, we hear all the mistakes. But from my own experience, and the only reason I know this works, and the only reason I started doing it, is I started to do it for myself in French. I was shy because I am actually a very shy person. I'm very introverted, and I really struggle with wanting everything to be correct and perfect. And if I have any sense that it might not be, I lower my voice and I'm very quiet. So when I first moved to France and I was in a restaurant or whatever, I would speak so quietly that people would respond with me and say, "What was that? What'd you say?" I took that as, "Your French is terrible. You have an awful accent." And that continued to feed my perception of myself. But what the real problem was is I was just speaking quietly because I was afraid. So I had to learn to get comfortable with how I sounded in French. And I had to figure out what it is that I am actually doing well and where are my problem areas. And the only way I was able to figure that out is by recording myself, listening to it, evaluating it, and saying, okay, well, I did actually answer the question, and I did actually use the correct sentence structure. So that's not my problem. Maybe I just need to articulate it a bit more clearly, or maybe I need to work on that sound. But it empowered me to take more control over the areas I felt, or the areas where I lacked confidence, and start to build that up. And the more I did it, the more comfortable I became with my voice, and the more I could change things if I wanted to. And that completely transformed how I felt in the language. And so that has become a real feature that we use in all of our classes, is taking the time to record yourself, go back and evaluate it. And then we have different questions that we walk students through, so that, again, they know what they're doing well, which kind of gives them a pat on the back and lets them say, you know what, I can do that. And then let's empower them. It empowers them to fix the things that they need to fix. And of course, we're there to help them do that. So if there are certain instructions or activities or methods that we can advise, we will do that. But that has been really profound for our students.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, I do a lot of recording, a lot of training teachers on how to get students to do self recordings. And it's interesting because the first thing you said when you started talking about it was like, you don't like to hear your voice, you hear all your mistakes, and it's like, oh wait. One of the big problems speaking other languages is you don't notice your mistakes. I mean, on the accuracy side of things, on the fluency side, you don't want to monitor too much and think too much about them. And that's why recordings are so great, because it's not in real time. you know, so
Right.
so if you know, you can hear the mistakes but not be monitoring them while you're talking, but just, you know, doing it, having a place to do it, because then that will help you self-correct. I mean, some of the best error correction there is listening to yourself. I
Exactly.
think it's going to really make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that's sort of
Yeah.
that next stage where it's like, you know, you're like, so yesterday I mean, I ate. It's like, you know,
Exactly.
why did I
And that
self-correct? You know, a lot of that has to do with input and practice and repetition, but the self-correction is definitely, I found, much more effective when you've done recordings than it is just
absolutely.
by other people
Yeah.
correcting you. Yeah, hearing
Yeah.
it.
It's really interesting. In one of the major courses I have is Fluency School. It's a 6-week course. And I can pinpoint a certain point of the course where we start to see this huge shift in self-correction. And it happens after the first few weeks of doing this recording,
Yeah.
evaluating. And our course is designed for students who have a B1 plus level or higher, B1 and higher. And so at that point, they've learned most of the grammar structures that they're going to use.
Right.
And it's there in their minds. And so when they go back and listen to themselves, they may not have thought about the right structure in the moment, but going back and listening to it, they don't need me to correct it. They hear it and they know, and they'll say, oh, I should have done that.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, it's giving them some feedback. It's saying, I actually do know some English grammar. I know this, I know these rules, I know this structure. I just didn't think about it in that moment. But now that I recognize it, now that I heard myself do that, I'm more likely to self-correct. I recognize it in the moment, or I can even prevent it. I might feel myself starting to say it incorrectly, and before I even do so, I just correct it mentally, and I say what I need to say correctly. So it's such an effective strategy. But it typically really helps our shyest students, because it helps them overcome that challenge of maybe speaking too quietly. As they start to gain some of that confidence and hear it in their voice, it helps them get a little bit more comfortable. And even we use the expression to fall in love with your voice a lot. And that happens with our students quite a bit, where they'll say, you know, I'm starting to like how I sound. I recognize my voice now in English. And that's a really fun moment.
It's wonderful. I wanted to ask, I mean, I'm curious to hear more about what you do in the classroom, but I'm even more curious at this point to know, what are these B1 higher students doing? Well, first of all, how many hours are they just with you, or are they also possibly taking other courses, doing other stuff? Is it sort of an exclusive thing they're doing, or it depends?
Yeah, we have several courses. Fluency School is our primary one. It's a 6-week course. And in that, I do the primary group coaching, and I also have a VIP version, which is in a bit of a smaller group. But we also have several of our team members who are coaches in the course as well, helping with the group coaching, helping with feedback, those kinds of things. So they're hearing from multiple people.
But I guess what I really want to know is, are they taking classes outside also? Like, are they in other programs? Like, is when they're with you, that's all they're doing? And obviously 6 weeks is not the beginning and end of their English learning journey. So I'm just wondering, how does it fit in, I guess?
Yeah, I think I don't know for every student.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Given the workload of Fluency School, I would anticipate that when they're in Fluency School, that's the only thing they're doing. I haven't heard about students saying, I'm doing this and.
Yeah.
After Fluency School, we have a program where it's an ongoing month-to-month program specifically for our Fluency School graduates, and we have quite a few people who join that for ongoing 2 days a week. They have classes. And so for some of them, we do have quite a few students who have graduated Fluency School, who have continued with us in our month-to-month program. Many of the women in our courses have also joined our Confident Women community. Some of them might also have private teachers or classes through their company, things like that. But I don't know to a great extent.
I guess I'm asking, I'm really curious about what they're doing, like between classes with English, which I'm sure varies as well. But like, is there a focus on kind of practice outside, whether it's, you know, listening, reading, writing? Like, is it intense in that side of it too, or is it mainly focusing on what you're doing when you get together?
No, no, everything that we do in fluency school, we tell students constantly, if you never study with us again, everything you're learning here, you can do on your own, whether it's with self-study or if you take a course in the future with someone else, or you start with a private teacher. These are still skills or techniques you can use in any capacity. Or even if you're just preparing for a business meeting in 6 months, you can come back and use some of these strategies to help you get ready for that
So it's
meeting in English.
more focused on the strategies and techniques than on the content. Not to minimize the importance of content, but it's,
right.
if I looked at a syllabus or a plan of what you guys are doing, it's not based so much on like this function of English, this grammar topic, this.
No,
it's more.
We actually don't teach any grammar.
Right.
We don't teach any grammar at all.
Okay.
I mean, they might touch on things and say, let's go back and remember, what you learned about X, Y, and Z. But no, it's much more about the strategies or techniques. In our ongoing courses, we sort of build on what they've learned and allow them to continue using those skills in ways that also might introduce higher level vocabulary or work on listening skills. But we really want to set them up for ongoing practice, however that looks, or wherever they do that, whether it's with us or someone else. These techniques work no matter who they're working with or what program they might be in, or
okay. How back to the student who's just naturally introverted. You said you really have you sort of built what you're doing, kind of thinking about those kinds of students. But how do you, like we were talking about before, a student who feels like, oh, that's me. I'm reading about like I'm introverted, I'm shy, and then it turns out that they're really not. Do they still feel it was more because they didn't have enough English, for example, yet? So does that person then feel like maybe this is not the right program for me, or do you think that it's not that you have to be, an introvert to join?
Yeah. No, we actually do have quite a few who will say, in my native language, I'm this, but in English, I'm this.
Right.
And I think the skills that we teach help both. I mean, if we do a lot of skills around the ability to think in English and sort of formulate your thoughts in English and how to move those thoughts to expressing yourself verbally, giving yourself space and time to think, and making sure that what you say when you are communicating is clear. It is fluent. And we talk a lot about fluency is not about being fast. I say to my students a lot, being fluent isn't about being fast. It's about being in control and communicating clearly.
Yeah.
So we really work on having that control in your communication. So the students that might be more naturally extroverted, we start to see that as they get more comfortable or gain those skills. We start to see that extroversion come out a little bit more in their English, when they're using English as well. Which is fun. But I think the same skill sets help them get to that point where they're feeling more comfortable or more confident in their skills in a way that allows them to be a little bit more of who they are in English.
So because I mean, who says I feel confident when I speak English and is looking for a course? I mean, I would think the people that would feel like, I feel really confident with my English speaking, they're not looking for you or anybody else.
Right.
So, so it's interesting. I guess I keep going back to that I feel like, and looking at your materials, I think almost anyone would feel like what you do would help them. Because I think wherever you are, the more, it's not as if, as we all know, the more advanced you get, the more confident you necessarily feel. It's not always like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think by being really explicit about introversion, and some students will say, well, I need so much time to think about what it is that I want to say. And sometimes I'll ask, well, are you like that in your native language as well? If I compare myself to my husband, he just is like this all the time. He has to speak in order to think. I'm the absolute opposite. I have to think in advance before I can articulate what it is that I want to say. And so sometimes when students say that, I'll ask, okay, well, how are you in your native language? And maybe it's okay that you're not just talking all the time in English. Maybe it's okay that you need a little bit more space. So how do you create that space in your life? Just like you would, when we talk about job interviews, people have to talk about their strengths and their weaknesses. And when they talk about their weaknesses, they have to highlight how they've compensated or what they've learned from that weakness. So I prefer to work by myself. I love working individually. However, if I'm going to work on a team, there are certain things that I do so that I can be a good team member. Well, the same thing is true if you're an introvert. Maybe you need more time to think before you speak. So how do you create that opportunity, or how do you compensate for that when you're in a meeting and someone expects you to speak now? What can you do to be prepared for that? So I think we really work on letting students know that some of those things are just naturally who we are, and it's okay. It's totally okay. Yeah. I think a lot of them have felt when those things happened in English, it was somehow related to their ability to communicate in English, or it was somehow a fault or of some kind, or a mistake. And so it's more about just letting them know that, you know what, a lot of us are like that, and we find ways to compensate for it, and we find ways to go forward, and just like you would with anything else.
So I'm curious, somebody watching this right now, do you think that they would just think of you as an introvert who can't really spontaneously put stuff out there and talk? Is it, why are you able to do that because you've developed strategies? And
yes,
is that what it is? So you're like, it's like the hair club for men. Like you're not just the owner, you're also like a customer. Or?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Okay. And my students never believe that I'm an introvert. But in my personal life, I mean, I will tell them I'm such a homebody. Yeah. At any party, I am the wallflower stuck to the wall in the corner, hiding behind as many people as possible. I can be what we would say is more extroverted for limited periods of time. And when I've put myself in a mental space to say, okay, for the next 2 hours, you're going to be like this. And then you're going to be able to just sit back and put headphones on for an hour and chill out. And so I think, I can certainly express myself more spontaneously. And even going into this, I mean, I actually spent a lot of time thinking through what we might talk about and how am I going to respond and what do I want to say. And
but it's very unstructured. So that's, you think that you'd want it to be more like, we have to know what we're going to do. And it's not like that at all. So
no, but I think it comes with practice. I mean, I talk to students. I use the analogy of, I always liked with my students, when it's the first day in the classroom, I'll ask if anybody plays a musical instrument. And so we'll start out with, let's say that you're learning a new song on the piano. How do you approach that? And it's clunk, 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 reading the notes carefully. I mean, it's just this slow, clunky process. But of course, anytime you do something, and this is your big thing, repeat, 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 the importance of repetition, it turns something into something that becomes automatic for us. And so I think even my communication, I've done this so much now. And I think being a teacher for so long, again, I can create the notes in my head. I have the bullet points, but I don't have to memorize things. I don't have to read a script. I've learned how to not have to do that.
On the linguistic side of things, like, in all your experience with students like this, is there anything in particular, any area that you feel like impedes, like, speaking more, or, communicating more? I mean, there's all the cognitive stuff, the personality stuff that we're talking about, and the strategies you use with those students. But is there anything you feel is also really important to focus on from a language standpoint that can really make things easier for those?
So can you Can you
I guess I
clarify
mean,
a
yeah,
little
I
bit
guess I mean, like, do you feel like, oh, it's a illicit listening skills issue more than it's anything else, or it's like, students who need to, do more meaningful repetition with chunks of language or phrases, or, is there anything that you feel is on a list of, not a list, but in what you're doing for strategies and techniques that's more of a language strategy and technique than
I really think it's all of the above. I don't think we can exclude anything. As you were asking that, a couple of things that came to mind. Our fluency school course, we talk about it as being a 6-week intensive speaking course. And students are always stunned by how much we actually work on listening skills, because for effective communication to take place, it's not just about how you speak. You have to be able to be present in the conversation. You have to be able to follow what other people are saying. And so one of the things, students will start the course with us, and if they're in a small group, their initial thought is, oh my gosh, what if someone asks me a question? What question are they going to ask me? And while other people are talking, they spend all that time in their head freaking out about getting asked a question. By the end of the course, they're just listening to what everybody else says, and the moment someone asks a question, they respond. They've shifted into that listening mode and realized that just by following the conversation, it actually is really easy to respond to the questions that come up. We just have to get to that point. But I think, when we talk about skills, we'll talk about the importance of giving yourself time to pause between speaking. You don't have to talk so fast where there's no spaces in between any words so that you sound fast and fluent. Like, that's not fluency. That's just talking really fast, and it's hard for anybody to understand. Give yourself space. And when you need time, buy yourself time. And so we teach chunks of language, and we ask them to repeat and use, that's a great question. I have to think about it for a second, or whatever it might be. But giving them examples of phrases that can be used, and having them practice using that so that that particular phrase becomes automatic. Or, so I don't know if there's a particular language skill that I think is more important than
what
the
you
other.
said about listening is exactly the kind of thing I'm curious about. So I'm also, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm also curious about pronunciation. Like, how much does that come up? I mean, listening can obviously help so much with that too, especially consciously. But I mean, do you find that people worrying about their accent or feeling just shy with speaking? Like, do you think there's pronunciation issues that can be, like, that some of that speaking can be overcome if they focus more on pronunciation, or the opposite, that maybe they're thinking too much about, like, how to move their mouth and how to use English.
Again, I think there's so much, there's a lot there. A lot of our students will start and they hate their accent. They think nobody can understand them. But then they go into small groups, or they go into some of our speaking practice, and they realize nobody asked them what. Nobody said, could you say that again? And people just responded to it.
If I could just jump in, and is that because you help raise their awareness of that, or they notice on their own? Because I
think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, because I've often seen students that, like, they didn't really get that until, like, did anybody ask you what? Did you really, and because it's so hard, they themselves don't even realize. So you're saying sometimes they on their own realize it and gives them confidence, and other times you're sort of showing them, hey, look, people understood you.
Sometimes at the end of a class, I just had a workshop with a group of students last week, and we were talking about the definition of family. What is family? Is it really just limited to blood bonds and things like that, or can we take a broader definition of what family might be? And so at the end, and we did small groups, and I was with different groups, and at the end we came back to our large group, and I said, how many of you have ever talked about this in English before? And most of them never had. And I said, how many of you are surprised that the people in your groups understood everything that you said? And so sometimes it's just that simple question. So that can start to alleviate concern with pronunciation. We do teach things like the use of intonation in certain things, what they might hear. and how intonation plays a role in how we speak. We talk about sentence stress and all of those things. Sometimes there are students that really struggle with specific sounds, and it is causing communication difficulty. And so that might be an area where, if with our fluency school course, we have a whole personal feedback portion. And so that would be something where on a personal level, we'll say, okay, well, let's work on this sound, because you're right. It's challenging. So then let's work on, you know, how do you formulate that? What muscles do you have to work? How can you practice that?
If it's necessary.
But that thing again comes from, whether it's a student who's willing to speak in a large group or is more comfortable in a small group, at some point we have to be present to observe that and to note that. And because they might not know that it's that one specific sound that's the problem. They might think it's their pronunciation as a whole, where it's really just this, if we could let's just work on that one little sound a bit. And that's going to make it so much easier for you and for others who are listening. So that all comes from being, you know, making sure that we're present in those smaller groups as well.
Different question now about online teaching, since so many more people are doing it, and you're someone that was doing it before. Do you feel at this point any limitation on what you do because you're not in person with any of your students, or do they ever feel that, or it's just a non-issue?
I think it's a non-issue. The only time it becomes an issue, I have students that have now been with me for 5 years. So I know them really well. And I've met several of them in real life. I mean, when I travel now, I know people almost everywhere. So I get to meet people in real life regularly, not for the last couple of years, but I think the only time it's been hard is when one of my students is going through something that's hard. Right now with the situation in Ukraine, we have a lot of students who are really struggling. And I'm the kind of person, I love hugging, and I love, you know, just being able to be there when someone I care about is going through a hard thing. That is the only time I really hate online classrooms. I really I wish we could all be in a classroom together. But to be really honest, when I first started this business, it was when my husband and I were moving to France. And prior to that, we move regularly for his job. And so I've changed careers or changed locations and had to find a new teaching job so many times. And I just didn't have it in me to do it again. And so we thought, okay, we've got this 4-year period of time. We'll be in France. I could try something on my own, see where it goes. But I was so reluctant to doing online. Even though I was doing some private teaching online at that time, I was really reluctant because I thought, I'm just not going to have that connection with my students. And I was 100% wrong. Somehow I have more connection now with my students than I ever have with a student that I had in a traditional classroom.
So I tell a lot of teachers, I have a feeling you give the same advice, that, you know, because I've been doing it a long time too, that it's just like anything else. It's about practice and getting better at it. And, you know, that, there is that very big difference between being in real life with someone and doing it online, especially at the beginning. Right. So it's not, I feel like so many things that people think or often think are, you know, limitations, are because they just haven't figured out how to, you know, get around it. Let's just do it more and learn more about it. And a lot of those things will disappear.
Absolutely.
So, that's important for people to know if they feel like they're just stuck, trapped teaching online. That doesn't have to be like that. I wanted to ask you one more question. I love it. Before we stop. Yes, so do I. And you're right about the bonds and the way it's easier, you know, paradoxically to be in touch with students when you're working with them online than you have it to someone in the classroom. They kind of disappear more than if you're with them online, which is interesting. What's happening in the future? Like, are you the kind of person that's sort of planning things? You've got like this idea, okay, next I'm going to do this, next I'm going to do that. You want to sort of stick with where you are and what you're doing. Anything you want to share with us about that? So I think the future for us, as I said, we've got several courses
that we offer, and we're looking at sort of next year maybe relaunching a new version of our signature course, our Fluency School course. So that's something we're working on right now. Is, you know, what do we want to adjust? How do we want to change it? What do we want to add to it? So we'll probably be relaunching a new version of that next year. We just launched our Confident Women community in July last year. So right now it's just been a really fun first 6 months of growing and experiencing what that means to create an online community outside of social media. We're not using a Facebook group. We're not using anything like that. And so how do we create this community? How do we facilitate connections among our members that are meaningful and allow them to practice together, to support each other? And so I think most of our effort and time will be spent inside that community going forward, continuing to look for opportunities to grow the community, and then just making it a really vibrant, wonderful place to be for the women who choose to join. So I think that's probably where our efforts are in the next year or two.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Please share with us where people can get in touch with you, whether
Absolutely.
they're a student who wants to learn more and join, or should we encourage teachers to?
Sure.
Do you have anything specific that you offer for teachers, or is it really mainly focused on students? Learners?
You know, at this time I don't. There was a time where I did do some coaching for teachers, and I did some one-on-one coaching for teachers. I loved it. I just got so busy with the stuff I do with students, and I had to sort of make a choice of what I love more. So
really important.
I'm not doing that right now. But I do have, and we continue to have quite a few non-native English teachers who have struggled with confidence or not feeling like their speaking skills are where they want them to be. We've had them join Fluency School. We have them in the Confident Women community. So we do have quite a few who are English language experts.
So teachers out there who feel like they, and I know a lot of teachers who are also just frustrated because they, all of their or most of their time using English is with their middle school kids or high school kids. So they're also just, want to be in an environment with people learning English at a higher level. So that might be
absolutely
too. Yeah.
We have a little group in our Confident Women community. We have a group of women who are all English teachers. Most of them teach elementary age. A couple teach middle school and high school, but they really enjoy getting to talk about what it's like to be an English teacher in Brazil or India or wherever it is they are. But then also just to get to have this sort of higher level intellectual connection with other women and have these conversations. Like right now in the community, every 2 weeks we have a specific topic that we're focused on with vocabulary and conversational questions. So right now we're focused on emotional intelligence. What is it? Why is it important? How do you develop emotional intelligence? How does it help you further your professional skills? How does it help you further personal growth? And so it's just been exciting to have this conversation on something that we don't talk about every day, even in our native language, but to have that experience. So it's
very cool.
It's exciting.
No, I mean, I knew a bit about what you do, but now, of course, once you know more, it's like, okay, now I can really go look at what you're doing, understand it better. So I hope that people watching do the same, because it's great stuff you're doing, and congratulations on your success. And hope
thank you.
I'm sure it will continue. And thanks for being our featured teacher for February.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for thinking of me and inviting me. I hope that something was helpful to somebody.
I'm sure many things. I'm sure of it. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, thanks everybody. Thanks again, Annamarie. Thanks to all of you out there, English language teachers, everybody watching this. Please share it with your friends and colleagues. Thanks to American TESOL Institute for making these webinars possible. Have a great evening, if it's earlier, or tomorrow. Great weekend ahead. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Jason, so much.
Bye.